you very much, Pastor. That was uplifting and inspiring. And thank you all very much for coming out tonight. And let me just start off with the first question. Are you all ready to term limit Eric Cantor? All right, with that, I want to thank you all for coming out, but that's just not a little flip phrase that probably too many politicians use. I'm going to ask you later in the talk, at the end of the talk, to be your representative. I want you to say yes to that. I want to ask you for your support in many ways across the board, but I want to ask you, right, people in the 7th District, for your support. I'm asking to be your representative, but you are the people that are going to be represented.
That's right.
And so let me start by doing something maybe some politicians don't do enough, and that's by thanking the people who put this event together tonight. Anyone that worked on this event in any way, door knocked, volunteered, put the event together, organized, managed, speak, please take a stand and enjoy our thank you for putting this together. Well, good. Let me get to the talk itself. I'll introduce myself a little bit and tell you why I'm running, then I'm happy to take as many questions as you all have. I'm Dave Brat, originally from Michigan. Went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan. A bunch of Dutchmen and pastors over there. I had friends, pastors, professors that were good mentors to me, and they kind of inspired me to get into higher education, and that eventually led me to Randolph-Macon. After Randolph-Macon College, I went to work for Arthur Andersen in business in their Detroit and Chicago offices for a couple years. Enjoyed the work there, but I knew it wasn't my calling. And while I was in Detroit, I can remember the day I felt the call to Princeton Seminary and answered the call. Didn't really know what I was embarking on. I was thinking I was probably going to end up being a professor of theology, systematic theology, ethics, morality, and that kind of thing, and probably teaching undergrad students. And so I went to seminary, loved it, best education I had in my life, great people. And while I was there, I went on a political semester down to Wesley Seminary, right in D.C., right next to American University, where I ended up going. And at Wesley, I caught a little bit of the political bug. But it wasn't politics, crass politics that you see every night on the news channel. It was an interest to get involved and engaged in our country on a serious level. And I was a little bit shocked because a lot of the pastors at seminary there, their first instinct is always, whenever you want to get something done these days, you write a letter to your congressman, right? And so that's kind of the efficient way to get things done, because up in D.C., everything starts with a T, right? It's all in trillions, right? Or hundreds of billions. And so if you want to quickly amass a super amount of power quickly, what do you do today? You just call your congressman and you get something done, right? But that's what every nation in history has done, right? It's always been run at the national level by kings and pharaohs and elites and whatever, and all those nations never grew like we did. They've not become successful like we did. And so I started studying a little bit and got interested in the history of ideas. And I think all of you know, Tocqueville and our founders, right, when the country was founded, the principles were exactly the opposite of that. You first tried to solve problems on your own through individual reliance, right? And then if you have a need, you go to your family and ask them for support. And then if you have a need beyond that, you go to your local leaders. Some of them are with us tonight. And then if that doesn't work, you go to your state leaders. And when all else fails, you can go to the federal government. But back in those days, it was only for the enumerated powers that were in the Constitution. And I think everyone in this room knows what that means, right? You're a rare audience, so I can kind of take that for granted. So in seminary, that was kind of the route I had. I got interested in economics and ethics and putting those two together and doing good public policy. And that led me to do my PhD at American University right next to it. Worked at the U.S. Army for a little bit, for a couple of years while I was in grad school, taught students international trade and that kind of thing. And probably most importantly, met my wife Laura up there. She can't be with us tonight because my daughter has a strings concert and my boy's got a tennis match tonight. But I hope you all kind of keep her in your hearts and in your prayers seriously, because this campaigning thing is not easy. It looks like it's easy, it looks like it's fun, but put yourself in my shoes, literally, right? And imagine what I got coming in a few weeks in terms of what's going to enter your mailboxes and whatever.
Yep.
And so I want to go through this talk and contrast myself with Eric Cantor, and it's not personal, right? I don't do this because out of spite or out of dislike or because I'm upset with him personally. But I believe in telling the truth, and the truth has a way of being stark sometimes, and it can be unpleasant. And so I'll share a lot of things that are going on with you at the state level, at the federal level, and they're not pleasant, but they're truthful, and my job is just to make you aware of those differences because I think they matter to our nation's future. So after my PhD program, and we both moved here to Randolph-Macon. I've been here for 18 years teaching economics and ethics, putting those two together. I've worked on the Governor's Revenue Estimate Council for the past 6 years. I was appointed to the Board of Accountancy the past year. I've worked in the General Assembly for years on education issues. Started off trying to get the kids with disabilities more school choice voucher options so they could have more choice and some different alternatives for them. So that's enough on me. Why am I running? I think I'm running for the reason you're all here today. We all know that Washington, D.C. is absolutely broken from top to bottom. Right? And so what does that mean to say Washington, D.C. is broken? I would just start with the basics. Right? The financial system is literally broken. The financial crisis back in 2007 was not just a little recession where you go down for a little bit and then come jumping out. We broke the financial infrastructure. And we're still reeling from that. The experts in the field say it takes about 7 to 10 years to come out of that, and that's if everything goes okay, right? The Federal Reserve still has $4 trillion on their balance sheet. For the first time in history, they're going to have to peel that back ever so gently and carefully, just perfectly, and get that right. Hopefully they do that, but if they don't, we have some more ripples coming. Everybody hear what happened on the market today, right? That can wake you up in a heartbeat, right? So the financial system is broken. The economy is broken. One leads to the other. Right? The financial system, by the way, just going back, where did that start? What sector? Housing. Right? So the one asset that had been safe for the American history, right? The American family home, we had not messed that market up. The geniuses on Wall Street figured out how to mess that up. Right? So we're upside down. That spread into the financial markets, into the financial system. We're still reeling from that. So the economy now we're growing at 2%. The Federal Reserve has said we're going to grow at 4%, then 3.7%, then 3.5%, then 3.2%. Right now we're down to 2%, and we're wondering if we'll maintain that level of growth. So we're becoming Europe, right? I'm not a doomsdayer. I don't see Armageddon out over the horizon. Europe's been being rather pathetic for the past 30 years, right? And we're joining them rapidly, and I think that's our course unless we change course. And I think all of us in this room want to be Americans, not French.
Hallelujah.
Nothing against it, right? But Americans do aspire to American exceptionalism. We are different. We've always been different. We hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I think that's why you're all here in this room today. So beyond the economy being broken, and I'll give you much more on that as the talk goes on, the healthcare system is broken. How many of you have neighbors or friends that have been adversely affected by Obamacare? Right, about everybody in the room, right? And that's just common. We'll go through that. And more seriously than all of that, what is broken? The rule of law is broken, and the trust in our government is broken. Right? Today on the news, I was listening to the talk radio all day long. NSA, IRS targeting, etc. is going through. And I hate to report this, but Eric Cantor, and how many of you have been following this slating issue? Yep. Right? Everybody, okay? So let me connect a couple dots for you just so you can think this through as I go through the rest of the talk. So Eric Cantor is intentionally slating conservative voters from participation in their district committee elections, right? 2nd District in Virginia Beach, they slated 1,000 people were waiting to participate in their own electoral systems, and only 34 were chosen. Right? So hundreds of people are slated from participating in the democratic procedure that our founders died for. Right? So this is a serious matter. Right? This isn't just some little cute political games where that's just politics and it's, what's the new TV show? House of Cards, right? Oh, it's just politics. I get that a lot, right? It's just politics. No, it's not just politics. It's your future, right? And your kids' future and your grandchildren's future. And when I get to the debt numbers and all that, that's on them as well. So it's serious business. And so what's the common denominator there when it comes to our current congressman? He's slating, who is he slating off the voting? Conservatives, grassroots, Tea Party folks, libertarians, conservatives, right? And then you look at the IRS investigations. Has Eric Cantor been screaming at full lungs at the microphone on any of those issues? No. And so in the IRS investigation, who's been targeted? The same group, right? So it doesn't take a genius to do the math on that, right? The same groups that are getting slated and knocked off are also being targeted by the IRS, and our congressman isn't speaking out and taking a position on it. And next it will be you, right? If not already. I'm looking forward to my own audit this year from the IRS, right? And you probably are looking forward to it too. So that's just the grand themes, right? Washington, D.C. is absolutely broken. You all know it. Let me continue to contrast the positions I will run on. I'm running the Republican ticket. I'm following the Republican creed. I think the creed is very good. It's actually creedal. And we'll go through them one by one. But let me first go through with you just very quickly what I think Eric Cantor is running on, what I know he's running on, and I can show it to you fairly easily. He's running on the Chamber of Commerce growth plan, right? The Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable. If you're in big business, he's good for you. But if you're in any other group, it's not so good for you. So let me go through this for you. I was sitting down having coffee one morning with my wife. January 14, I think it was, the chairman of AT&T wrote the Chamber of Commerce four-plank growth plan. And I told my wife, I said, this guy just wrote my stump speech for me, right? And so here it comes. This is exactly what Eric Cantor represents, is what the Chamber wants to do and what the Business Roundtable wants to do. It's not all bad, but you'll see, you'll get the point in a minute. Point number one that they set apart, far and above the other three, is they want stability in Washington, D.C. Right? So how many of you want chaos in your lives? No. Right? So they have very smart lawyers that know how to use language very well. And so the number one thing they want is stability. Well, what does that mean? What it means is let's kick the can down the road for even a few more years, right? Let's not deal with the debt. Let's not deal with the deficits. Let's not deal with unfunded liabilities that are $127 trillion. And let's just kick the can down the road. And why is that? Because the new phrase on Wall Street is, we can make profits within any environment, right? Just keep it stable for us so we can make profits, right? I'm an economist, right? I'm pro-business. I'm pro-big business making profits. But what I'm absolutely against is big business in bed with big government. Right. And that's the problem today. Right, so that's issue number one. Then they can go into a few others. Free trade, which I don't see why they really need to mention, because free trade is free, and you don't need to manage it too much. The point four, what does big business want? They want immigration reform, right? And what does that translate into? Amnesty. Eric Cantor was on the Sunday shows about 3 or 4 weeks back with Major Garrett. And Major Garrett asked him very pointedly 3 times in a row. He said, will you please explain to us the Republican House position on immigration reform, your new immigration reform principles? And Eric wouldn't answer him. And there's a good reason he won't answer him, because you're all watching the TV program, right? You're all watching. He does not want to say it. So Major Garrett asked him again, hey, I had you on the show so you would articulate these principles. He wouldn't explain them. Third time, Major got a little upset. And so on immigration, right, the DREAM Act, giving amnesty to certain groups of people who break the law and come in, and then now what happened this week? In economics, usually one distortion, right, when you screw up one thing, it ends up having unintended consequences and screwing up something else. So where did the DREAM Act ricochet into this week? Into the defense authorization bill, right? So now the House proposal is, let's take these folks who broke the law coming into our country and put them into the armed services. Yep. Right? I know, it's crazy. It's the logic just is not logic. And so you know that's going to have some more unintended consequences. And we just had a financial crisis where we saw the effect of unintended consequences. So it's just boom, boom, boom. When you don't follow principles, you end up in trouble. And so what's the principle that's being violated? It's called the rule of law. And so we've got to get back to it. So there's the chamber, there's the big business. principles in a nutshell. I'm not going to keep you here all night, but let me go through the Republican creed with you very briefly, and I'll just mention a few issues under each one of the 6 parts of the Republican creed so you get a sense for it. And they align with a lot of other grassroots creeds. They're very similar, and most people are in full agreement with most of these principles because they're good. Starts off with a commitment, number 1, to free markets. And I'm not sure if anyone up in Washington, D.C., I shouldn't say that, there are a few, but not many people up there understand what free markets are. Right? And so free markets, in a nutshell, what does it mean? It means no one is shown favoritism. Right? Everyone is treated equally, every firm, every business, so you compete fairly. And no one, if you're big or small, is shown special attention. And we're losing that. And so how do you see that most clearly? Again, the recent financial crisis, where did it start? In the housing market. We all know, basically, probably the primary cause is located in Fannie and Freddie. Right? And so one of the think tanks up, I can't remember, American Enterprise Institute, estimates 70% of all subprime loans, right? 70% of all subprime loans went through Fannie and Freddie. Instead of who? Instead of through your banker. So we're putting bankers out of business. Bankers aren't doing banking, right? In the past, bankers actually had to check your credit if you wanted a mortgage. Today they don't. When Fannie and Freddie, they just say, here's a mortgage. Do a liar loan. You tell them, how much do you make? You make $1 million? Okay, good. I believe you. What's your name? John Smith. Here's your mortgage. Right? The bank writes it up, gets a fee, gets a quarter of a point. Everyone's happy. Except all that risk that was just ignored goes where? Onto you. Right? All that risk goes onto your backs. And when there's failure, who pays the bill? The American taxpayer. So free markets, it's very hard to conceptualize and teach that. I do it every day, right? I teach economics to 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds. It's not easy to understand free markets, right? You can put up supply and demand curves, but to see how that works, it takes some education. And so I hope you're all educating your neighbors on what that means. And when it also comes to free markets, Eric Cantor has voted most recently for the Farm Bill. Do those billions of dollars go to the small American farmer? No, they go to huge agribusiness, right? Big business again. He voted for the flood insurance program. Who does that go to? A lot of the money goes to gazillionaires on both coasts who have homes in nice real estate locations. Right? So let me get to another point that concerns free markets, because the Republican Party is often accused of being a party which lacks compassion. Right? Totally unfair. And let me give you the evidence for that. I'm teaching a course called Third World Economic Development now at the college. I've taught that for 18 years. Let me tell you what's going on in China right now. China, for the first time in history, is feeding 1.2 billion people. 1.2 human beings that we all love. Right? How are they doing that? For the first time in history. They're finally using free markets. Right? So 1.2 billion people, for the first time in human history, finally have clean water, some food, nutrition. Right? Their incomes have gone from $500 a year to now about $7,000 a year in the past 20 years. And that's a good thing. And just ask yourself, because America is moving in the wrong direction. Right? And China's moving in the right direction, ironically. China's moving toward freedom. Hopefully they can maintain it. They have problems of their own that they're going to have to deal with. Right? But how did they do that? Did they do that by tinkering with cool, neat little new government programs? Or did they do that by letting markets work and achieving 10% growth rates for the past decade? And that's it. So we're moving away from free markets as China is moving toward them. And India's right behind, right? They have another billion people that are finally being fed as well. So we became the greatest nation on earth because of pastors early on, right? Because of the Judeo-Christian tradition, linked with the rule of law, and linked with free markets. You put those three things together, and you get the most prosperous country on the face of the planet, right? And that's the United States of America. And that's why we're all here fighting for it tonight. That's plank number 1 of the Republican Creed. Plank number 2, all individuals are entitled to equal rights. Do we believe that? All individuals. Where did that come from? A philosophy professor? Where do rights come from? They come from God, right? The government's role is to protect those rights that are God-given in the first place. Let me just give you one smoking gun problem with our current congressman, and I think this is the smoking gun, and if you tell your friends and neighbors about this issue, I will be your next congressman. This issue is called the Stock Act.
That's right. Yep.
The Stock Act, after the financial crisis, when we should have learned some lessons, and we have not. How many people went to jail after the financial crisis? Hardly any, right? Very few. Where did they go? They went back on the Rolodex of Obama and the Republican leadership as well. Both sides. Guilty. 100% guilty. So after the financial crisis, there was a good bill going through. It's called the Stock Act. And the Stock Act was going to end insider trading. Right? So these congressmen and senators are already all gazillionaires. Right? Several times over. And they're already buddies with all the CEOs and know what's going on with Wall Street. They already have plenty of good information to make trades. Right? But that's not enough. They need more. Right? They need more power. And so the Stock Act was going to clean up insider trading. It went through the Senate, and then somehow, when it came to the House, one congressman in the U.S. House changed the language in the Stock Act so that spouses could still do insider trading. You know who that congressman was? That's the proper reaction. That was Eric Cantor. And I'm running for office, so don't believe everything I say, right? Everything I'm telling you the truth on every single thing. And if you want to ask questions on what I'm saying, I claim I am telling you the truth on every single thing here tonight. But go double check it. CNN caught him. He denied it, and then he came back to him, caught him again, and he said, I'm going to check on that. And then 60 Minutes did an expose as well. Right? So that one right there for me is an impeachable offense.
That's right.
Right? If you get caught doing that, right, and I can go on and on and on about number 2. All individuals are entitled to equal rights. That is the NSA again. That's IRS targeting, etc., etc., etc. Number 3 is not a joke. We as Republicans believe in fiscal responsibility. Right? How is Washington, D.C. doing on fiscal responsibility? It's embarrassing. It is almost humorous, except it affects our lives. Right? And a lot of people don't have jobs because of this right now, right? Some of us are lucky enough to have good employment. Some of us do not have jobs. And so this is serious. So let's cover the basics on fiscal responsibility. The debt is at over $17 trillion. And share with your friends and neighbors the U.S. debt clock. Go to the bottom of the U.S. debt clock, scroll all the way down to the bottom, add up the 4 numbers at the bottom, and those are called the unfunded liabilities. So that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the Bush prescription program. Those add up to $127 trillion. And that's just the unfunded part. Right? So that's in law. We have to change current law if we want to get out of that mess. Those 4 programs by themselves take up the entire United States budget by 2048. So do the math on that one, right? Nothing left, not a dollar left to spend on anything. No defense at all, no payment on the interest, no nothing. Those 4 take up the entire budget by 2048. And that's CBO, very boring, conservative numbers. So is that fiscal responsibility? No. Now, let me give you the major point there that matters. So that's not fiscal responsibility, and you can always blame it on somebody else, and politicians always do, right? But will leadership on the Republican side or will leadership on the Democratic side ever even mention that number? Have you ever heard that number? $127 trillion. And it's in the textbook. If you haven't heard that number, Houston, we have a problem. Right? Our leadership is not being honest with us about the biggest economic problem we have in the country. And I mean literally the biggest. Right? So then a lot of people in this room will say, well, give Eric a chance, Dave, be a nice guy, turn the other cheek or do something like that. And, just wait till they get the Senate. Because then clearly Eric will get it all right. And we'll go into Nirvana land or something. Right? Just wait another year till we get the Senate. And what's the problem with that logic? The problem is, if you go back to 2002, we had the House and the Senate and the President. And Eric Cantor raised the debt ceiling limit in 02, 03, 04, 06, 07. And I think if I have it right, he raised the debt ceiling limit 10 of the last 14 opportunities. And if I think I have my facts right, the debt that Eric Cantor is responsible for, if you look in the sense that he's been in office, he's responsible for 14 trillion of the 18 trillion since he's been in office. And so is he fighting hard? Do you know? Is he fighting hard for you on that issue or not? And I don't think so. And I'll get to an example of that coming up. So fiscal responsibility is not present. I teach college kids every day. They're cynical, right? If I ask them about Social Security, I say, you know you're not probably going to get much Social Security, right? I won't say zero. But do you know that you're going to get a very reduced portion of Social Security? And they say, yeah, we probably won't get any. And I say to them, well, are you upset about that? And they're like, no, it's just the way it is, dude. It's just, right? I don't understand that reaction, but they've had 13 years of SOLs beforehand, they're just numb. Right? And I could go on and on and on, don't get me going, I'll start getting humorous too quick. All right, let me get to point number 4 in the Republican Creed, and that is serious consideration of constitutional limitations. And our speaker today here made us intuitively aware of what that means. And we could spend all night going over those. But NSA spying, IRS targeting, the same list over and over and over. Right? We're not following the Constitution. What does that mean? We're not following the Constitution. Let's just go with the 10th Amendment. Right? Unless the power is specifically enumerated in the Constitution, all powers should remain with the states. Is that the case today in any way, shape, or form? No. What led to the last financial crisis? Fannie and Freddie. Where are they housed? At the federal government level. Right? Should they be? Should anyone who follows the Constitution have allowed that to happen? So number 1, you should not allow them to exist on free market principles if you followed any of those principles. Number 2, you shouldn't allow them to exist on constitutional principles. And number 3, you just on common sense principles. Right? They're going to fail. You know they have to fail. Every planned economy has failed in the history of the nation. Right? We have the system that works. And we don't believe it. We don't trust it. Or we know better and we're empowering ourselves and staying in office. And that's a more cynical answer, but it could be true. Point number 5, people say, well, don't just beat up on Eric all the time. Eric and I are in agreement on number 5, and I think he's done a fairly good job. That number 5, that peace should be preserved through a strong national defense. Right? I think Eric has been solid on that. It's not my point to just tear people apart limb from limb just for kicks. So I think he's been strong on that. I think he went into Syria too quick. I think there was a knee-jerk there. And I will tell you one point of difference we have is on the Benghazi investigation. For some reason, our congressman will not co-author and support House Bill 36, it is, just for the investigation into Benghazi. I don't know why that is. If some of you have communicated with his office, and if there is a sound reason, let me know. But I don't understand why he will not sign on to that. Number 6, we're all in a church tonight. Point 6 on the Republican Creed, that faith in God as recognized by our founding fathers is essential to the moral fiber of the nation. That was the talk. I hardly have to go into it. But there's serious issues. When it comes to moral fiber, maybe I can deal more with this in the Q&A section. But this issue of slating concerns moral fiber. Right? We're used to the Democratic Party and this Saul Alinsky and all these rules for radicals and the strategy of winning at any cost and being unprincipled. Right? We're kind of used to the Democrats doing that. And we know the game plan. What we're not used to is when you see Republicans starting to use the same tools because they're clever and because you can win with them, but they're completely unprincipled and they're un-American. And so please communicate with our congressman how you feel about his new use of his slating procedure to wipe out conservatives who have every right to participate in our system.
Amen.
And raise your hand, by the way. We have a couple of superheroes sitting up here in the front row, I know, who led people out to our Henrico meeting. Raise your hand if you help or have helped in the fight against this slating thing, and be proud of it. And thank you very much. Right? So that was a classic team effort, right? The Hiles and Jamie Radke and tons of people. Everybody called 5 or 6 people, sent email lists, spread the word, and in Henrico, we stopped the establishment machine in its tracks because the people came out and said, we're not putting up with it. We had people come in there on one side of the fence and they saw principle in action and they flipped over because people want to believe in something good.
Yes.
And when you see good, you know it. And that happened on it that evening. I was very proud of our team. We were principled, and then when the tables were turned, you can see principle in action. Because did we slate them when we could have? And we did not. We acted with principle. The person who chaired that meeting was very formal and principled and mature and handled it with grace. And I was very proud to be associated with that evening. And thank you all for your leadership. I could go on all night. I will just say one other political word on unity, party unity. It's a bit ironic. I'm kind of a win-win guy. I'm usually way more positive than this. My kids in class die laughing most of my lectures. And so this is kind of a heavy, thick talk. And sorry for that. But I will just mention on the political side, another person ran for governor this past year, Ken Cuccinelli, and he had some very good free market impulses. And he wasn't supported by Eric Cantor at all either. Right? And we lost the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia by 2% because Eric Cantor didn't lift a finger on that one. And I could go over more and more and more examples. So you have slating, he won't support Ken Cuccinelli. And then it seems to me it takes some nerve to say, hey Dave, why don't you unify the party after they're ripping it apart? Right? I am trying to unify the party.
That's right.
And I'm unifying the party on the basis of these 6 principles right here.
Yep.
I don't care what party you're in. If you're libertarian, conservative, I don't care what you label yourself. If you're for those 6 principles, I want you on board. And if you're out knocking doors for Dave, Brat, and this campaign, you tell people, we want to treat everyone with respect. We're going to follow these fair, free market principles, and please come on board. And that's what unity is. And that's what I believe in, and that's what's going to lead us to success. With that, let me close with just one final example on what moral fiber doesn't look like. On the crucial policy issue of our day, about a year ago, involved the government shutdown debate. And Senator Cruz was up there, and whether you agree with his tactics or not in the short run, not really the point. The point is when Eric Cantor came up to bat, he came up to bat on that issue with 2 bills in hand. And he had Bill A, and he had Bill not A. How many of you have had philosophy in your lives? Right? If you have Bill A in your hand and Bill not A in your hand, that's called a contradiction. So let me explain what that is. And this is for real, right? You can't make this up. So Bill A was to look good in front of you. In front of conservatives and the grassroots, he had a bill to defund Obamacare. So I guess he's had about 50 of these, right? So he's got the showpiece sitting there. And he can tell you I'm against it. But knowing that would go down, he had another bill put in at the exact same time, Bill non-A. And what did that bill do? That bill fully funded Obamacare and made no concessions on the budget to President Obama. So we got Obamacare in law, fully funded, and the full budget with no spending cuts, and we got rid of sequester. Right? And the debt ceiling goes up. Again and again and again. So you can believe the Democrats are clever once or twice, right? They faked us out. We're learning, right? We got duped. But 14 years in a row, the same argument, I just don't buy it. Yeah. And so moral fiber needs some improvement up in D.C. And so I'm here tonight to ask you to be your next congressman for the 7th District. I'm humbled to be here, and I really do believe this is a team effort. I'm asking to be your voice in Washington, not my voice. Right? I'm asking to be the voice of the people. I'd be honored to go out there. I will fight for you. I look like I'm a mild-mannered guy probably. But I don't think you have to yell and scream and whatever, right, to get your way. You can vote yes or no without screaming and yelling, right? You vote on principle. I told you what my principles are. I'll put them on paper ahead of time. That's what ethics is. I'll put my pledges to you. I will term limit myself. I'll tell you about spending priorities ahead of time on paper. And I would be honored to be your next congressman. So thank you very much for coming out tonight and having me.